Hey, this is Meredith Elliott Powell. You know what time it is? It is time for Thrive, the show where we dive into the strategies, discuss the steps, everything that you need to know to consistently and effectively turn all of this uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. Now, I am hanging out today with a real pro, Angel Tucker, and we're going to talk about something that very few people are talking about in today's world, the importance of human connection and the importance of the ability to really communicate in a world where it feels like all the communication is going towards AI and technology. So get ready, take some notes. Here we go. Again, my guest today is Angel Tucker. Now, she is a personality strategist, a human behavior consultant, but I'm so interested, Angel, how did you get into this work? Like, what first took you down this avenue?
That's actually a great question. Well, when I was 19, I joined a company called Amway, which I'm sure we've all heard of. And I never really did anything with Amway, but part of their system was to listen to motivational tapes. Now, that tells you how long ago it was right there. Sure, you can identify with that. But I listened to some tapes about understanding personalities, and I just fell in love with the concept. And then shortly after, I had to go to a summer camp and be a youth director for a bunch of teens. And when I arrived, they called a meeting with all the staff and they said, "Oh, by the way, you have to teach a class every day for an hour, and we have no materials or resources for you whatsoever. So just keep them busy." Right. And I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to talk about? So I decided to talk to them about personality types. And Meredith, I saw how quick those teenagers got it. And some of the stories I still share on stage today came from that initial, training, I guess you would call it. But I just saw how quick they got it and how much it could really change the dynamics for the better in the way that they communicate with people that they, are around every single day. So from there, I said, somehow, I don't know how, I'm going to make a living doing this. And so that's how I got my start.
So, what does somebody who is a personality strategist or a human behavior consultant, what exactly do you do?
So typically, I go in and I train organizations on understanding who the person is on the other side of the conversation, whether that be, someone that they're interacting with in a boss relationship. Maybe it's even someone at home, right? Because here's what I believe, that when your people in your organization have a better life at home, they have a better life at work. And so I
So true.
go in and do just really a well-rounded session of how do I understand the person in front of me, and how do I avoid the number one mistake people make when they're interacting with the person in front of them, which is, I'm just going to interact with them the way that I want to be interacted with. And if they don't get it, they must be the problem.
Yeah.
Right. And so we have to adjust our communication style based on who the person is in front of us, because we don't all think, feel, act, and process information the same.
So, in a world that is becoming so, all I swear, anywhere I go, all anybody is talking about anymore is AI and IT and how it is going to, change the landscape. I mean, that's a form of communication, right? Where does all of this shake out? This whole idea of, learning to communicate better with our words and our tone and our expressions. I mean, where does all of that shake out?
Yeah, it's definitely something you have to remember is the human element, right, of success. And AI is great in its place, and it's certainly a tool that I use every single day. But we can't dismiss the human element. And at the end of the day, there's still a human being on the other side of that conversation. And if we want to make genuine connections with people, if we want business to be more about just the transaction, if we want it to be an actual relationship and connect and build trust with someone, then that's when we need to understand who the person is that we're talking to.
So this is, in the world that I grew up in, this would be known as a soft skill.
Yes.
So, which drives me a little bit bonkers because it's the most important skill that you can have. I watch it over and over again. I mean, you watch elections and it is never, it is never even the most qualified person who wins. It is the person who has the ability to connect, right? To create the message that resonates, that can really connect. I watch somebody in a negotiation and they don't necessarily have the best price or the best deal. What they've got is the most ability to read and then adjust and connect. So how do you how do you position it? How do you make it something that companies or people or organizations stand up and take notice of?
Well, really, what you have to do is identify the pain points of not understanding the person on the other side of the conversation and what that really costs them. And I know you're great at statistics and going into businesses and talking about uncertainty. And the one thing that is certain is that there is a human on the other side of the conversation, and that's not going to change, right? No matter what. And so when you can make that genuine connection, just like you just said, effective communication is the highest paid skill in existence, right? And it's not always about who's the most qualified. It's about who can communicate the message effectively. And so when companies understand that and understand what it's costing them not to create what I call a DISC culture, because DISC is the personality model that I choose to use, it's great for them to have a training, but their people are going to forget 80% of what I said the next week, right?
Completely.
Work. We've got to create the culture where everybody's speaking the same personality language and every single person in that organization understands how to interact with the person in front of them the way that they need them to, so that we create what I call win-win opportunities, right? It's not about being fake or changing who you are. It's just about knowing how to say things in a way that the message you want the person to get is the message they actually receive.
So, let's talk a little bit about uncertainty, and let's talk a little bit about, oh gosh, I mean, everybody I talk to right now, I mean, nobody. I was just on the phone before we started this podcast with a prospect in Colombia, and they've got a president that's shaking things up too. And they were talking about the fact that between what's going on here in the U.S., what's going on in Colombia, what's going on around the world, these things are so uncertain. Where does human connection, where do personality, where does the ability to read a room, where does that help or add value if I'm trying to navigate an uncertain marketplace?
That's a great question, Meredith, and I appreciate you asking that. And let's just face it, when we're dealing with uncertainty, and really we deal with that in so many different components, right? It's not just in business, it's not just in our personal life. And that's what I love about what I do, is that it's a life training. But when you're dealing with uncertainty, that's when you want to really seek out those people you can trust. Right. And how do you know who you can trust? It's those people you make genuine connections with, people that you feel like understand your needs and where you want to go and believe what you believe. But you can't find those people who believe what you believe if you don't understand how to interact with them effectively. And so that's why it's so important, that we are able to communicate our message in a way that it connects with the person based on who they are, not what resonates with us, but what do I need to say to communicate the importance of what I want to achieve, where I want to go, how to move through this uncertainty? And do you agree with that? Right? Are
Right.
we together? We making this connection? Can we trust each other to move through this together? And you can do that by communicating with your message to that person effectively, and not the way you would want it communicated with. I know, Meredith, both you and I are, we're very bottom line communicators, but you may have some people that, they need you to stop. They need you to slow down. They need time to ask questions without feeling that they're being rushed. They need to make sure they have clarity and that they have notice when change is going to happen. And so we don't walk through the same situations the same, right? And so when we can understand that and give that person what they need to deal with uncertainty, you and I are really good at changing on a dime, right? And
Yeah.
things are thrown at us. There's other personalities that aren't that way. And instead of thinking, well, what's wrong with you? Come on, let's get going here. We've got to move this direction. We have to do that in a way that they're comfortable with. We have to help them deal with uncertainty in the way that they need to. Not, it doesn't even have to make sense to me. I
Right.
just have to understand what it is that they need and provide that for them to get what I want. Right.
Right.
And I don't mean that in a selfish way. I mean, let's move through this together, but let me give you what you need to deal with the uncertainty so that we can, feel this trust between each other as we move through this together.
Now, I'm so intrigued. I want to talk about the book that you have out now, but I'm so intrigued with the fact that you started, or maybe you didn't, but you have a set of best-selling children's books. How did you? writing children's books. Tell us about your children's book.
Well, it kind of goes back to the teenagers that I taught. I really saw that the younger you are, the quicker you really understand what it is that I have to offer because you don't have those resistance barriers built up, right? Some personalities are like, no, 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 it can't be this easy, right? And they make it all, they're very skeptical about the whole thing. But
Sure.
children get it quicker than anyone I've ever seen, but there was nothing there to teach it to them. So I spent a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of effort to create a children's book series that walks them through fun adventures. And there's 4 different friends, and they each have one of the personalities. And so it shows, even though they're going through the same situation, how they go through that differently. And that here's the most important thing, Meredith, that I'm proud of about these books is that it lets kids know it's okay to be different from other children and that you
Yeah.
all can all be friends. You all have amazing strengths, that are very natural to you that you have to contribute. And so we've won awards with these books. I'm very proud of them. And so thank you so much for mentioning those.
So tell us about your book now.
So my book is Stop Squatting with Your Spurs On. We're
Yeah.
actually right now in the process of coming out with the second edition of that, doing some updates and such. And it really is what I call your Bible for communication. What I love about it is that it's an easy read. So even if you're not a big reader, you'll get through it in 2 hours or less, but you'll refer back to it forever because it's laid out in a way to remind you, how do I interact with someone that's the opposite of me? You have a meeting, maybe you're trying to pick up a speaking gig or a new customer, and they're the opposite of you. Your bottom line, and they want the details. Oh my goodness, what do I do? You just pick up the book, you read the section on their personality really quickly, and now you're reminded how to interact with them to build that win-win interaction.
It's so interesting. When you why aren't we taught these things as a child? I mean, I remember when I first got into the workforce, and I used to be a very high I followed by a very high D, and I honestly think my D was socialized out of me as a little girl because I think I was very aggressive. My mother told me that was not very ladylike. And now, if you look at my natural style and my adaptive style, I'm very direct. I'm very driven. I really do not suffer fools lightly. I just want to get to the point
Exactly.
and move. But when I first got into the workforce, I really leaned far more into my I because that was more female like to be. And I would write these epistles. I would write these emails that would be 3 and 4 and 5 paragraphs long with big explanation points and bold letters and everything. I had no idea how much I was irritating other people, you know?
Exactly, that is so true, and that's one of the things that I talk about in workshops, trainings. I do keynotes as well, but we talk about exactly that is what is your writing style and mirroring the writing style. You can tell someone's personality from the way they send you an email, a
Yeah.
text, everything if you know what to look for. And that's what I go in and teach them. And I do, simple cues, things, body language, speech patterns, all those things you have to pay attention, and then you know how to avoid exactly what you just said, right? And to communicate with them the way that they need you to. But the hardest part, Meredith, about doing what I do is paying attention to other people. Because
Mhm.
if we're being honest, who do we normally put our attention on, right? It's
Ourselves.
it's what we need to do, where we need to go. We've got our own agenda in our head, right? Especially us, we got that to-do list, right? And so when you can just take a step back and pay attention to the other person, they're giving you clues all the time. You just have to know what to look for. And so what I love is when I can go into school systems and I can get to those kids when they're younger, right? And train entire districts on, you know, giving this information and this power to the children to understand how to recognize each other and interact with them effectively.
Do you feel like, of all the things that you could have chosen to do, what was it about DISC that attracted you to that?
Well, a couple of things, and thank you for asking that. One is it's one of the oldest models. Myers-Briggs is a little bit older, but DISC is one of the oldest models. So what that means is we have a lot of validity studies that show its accuracy, and that's very important to me. If I'm going to get behind something, I want to know that it's accurate, right? I can't sell something that I don't first believe in. And secondly, it's user friendly. I can talk to someone about it for just a few minutes and then understand it enough to talk to someone else about it. And there's nothing that frustrates me more than spending my time listening to someone speak and walk out of the room and not knowing how to use what they just said. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I know that people's most valuable asset is their time. And so I want them to walk out of that room feeling empowered to change their relationships by making just a few changes. And then the third thing with the system that I use is we actually have some amazing resources that we can do. We can do, interaction reports. I can tell you how it's going to go between you and another person before you ever hire them. I can create a team chart that shows, hey, what's the dynamics of my entire organization? What does that look like? And am I too heavy over here? Do I have too many D's and I don't have a perspective of an S? Because we need all of them within our organization in order to be, to be well-rounded
Yeah.
and to have and to move forward, in the most proactive way possible.
So, what difference does it make, when you see a leader who really understands how to communicate, understands how to be effective? What type of difference do you think that it makes for the organization overall? Do you think there are statistics that enhance it, that grow the organization?
Absolutely, and one thing that it helps with, Meredith, which is quite costly, is a reduction in turnover. The number one reason that people leave their job has nothing to do with income or benefits. It's because they didn't feel appreciated and valued. And, the supervisor, the boss may have the best intention. They're like, "Well, I did all these things for them. I don't understand why they left." But what you were doing was what was important to you, what made you feel valued, not what made them feel valued. And so when you understand that, you know how to just make a few adjustments to now do things that make that person feel valued. And by default, you've reduced your turnover, which, as you know, turnover is very costly. I mean, having to hire and train and then go through that process again, it's a very, very expensive thing. You also can train that person more effectively because you understand how they learn, right? You can
Yeah.
invest out of them, they're more productive. You have a supportive S personality on your organization. They're amazing team players, but if they've gone through all the things you told them to do, they'll sit there and do nothing until you get back.
I
You know,
know. Is it? And I know that was
these are like,
that's
"Well, you didn't tell me to do that yet, so if I do it, you might get upset, and I'm not sure how you want it done, so I'm just gonna sit here and wait." And so, when you understand that that's gonna happen, you can then, prep them by having a side list of, "Hey, if you happen to get through these things before I return, go ahead and work over here on these side items," right? And so, when you understand that, now you're getting more productivity out of your people because you're interacting with them how they need you to.
yeah. It's so interesting. And I think, even like I got to the point of wanting to fire a few S's that worked for me because I was so frustrated with them. And they turned out to be, once I got it, they turned out to be some of the best employees I've ever had.
Yes, they are the most loyal people you'll ever have, and here's what's amazing. For people that are in the sales industry, they're typically D's and I's. I mean, it's just a natural attraction for them, but the most loyal customers you'll ever get are
Right.
S's and C's.
Yeah.
But if you don't understand how they buy, if you don't understand what makes them commit, you'll never get them. And so
Right.
instead of getting the loyal business, you're constantly working for new business, right? Instead of getting the loyal business that's gonna send you loyal referrals. And so by understanding that, you know how to go after those personalities as well.
Yeah, so true, so true. Well, it's hard to believe, but we are coming to close to the end of this podcast. I always like to end with two questions. Number one is, you can answer them in any direction. How do people find you? How do they get a hold of you? How do they tap into these children's books? How to squat with your spurs on? Your new book that's out. And then the other is, what's your biggest piece of advice for anybody that is out there struggling with uncertainty right now, struggling to communicate? With their team members, what is your biggest piece of advice to help them turn all of this uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage?
Thank you for both of those questions, Meredith. You can find me at usingdisc.com. My email is angel@usingdisc.com. Everything is in my online store online. My one piece of advice is before you interact with anyone, stop and say, "Who are they?" And then interact with them the way they need you to so that you can reduce miscommunication, you can reduce conflict, you can reduce misunderstandings, you can get on to being proactive in your interactions with others.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Um, audience, I hope that you grabbed the power and the importance of this today is that your communication is everything. We live in a world of high tech. And while I think communication was important 5 years ago, it has doubled, if not tripled. The ability to connect in a human way because it is void in our society today. So, if you are interested in ideas, if you want to understand the power of human connection, you need to check out Angel Tucker. Everything she does, this human behavior consultant, personality strategist, is going to help you learn what you need to know to turn all of this uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. We'll see you right back here next week for another episode of Thrive.